For over 40 years, Stuart Alve Olson has been studying Taoist and Buddhist philosophy and Chinese language while practicing Taoist meditation and ceremony, Qigong, Taijiquan, praying Mantis Kung Fu, and Internal Alchemy. Stuart is the founder, director, and head teacher at the Sanctuary of Tao, and born in the year of the White Tiger, 1950 in Minnesota. He is an author, translator of nearly 40 works on Taoist philosophy, Taijiquan, Qigong, and Taoist internal practices, many of which now appear in several foreign editions. Two of his works, Tai Chi 13 Sword and Tai Chi Sensing Hands, I served as his editor and publisher in the late 1990s. In his late 20s and early 30s, Stuart began learning from teachers such as Chan Master Hsuan Hua, under whom, on Christmas Day in 1979, he took refuge as his disciple at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, with a focus on the Guanyin Pure Land practices and the profound perfection of wisdom, diamond, and heart scriptures. Stuart studied under and became the disciple of renowned Tai Chi Master T.T. Liang, and learned under many other notable teachers, including Kung Fu and Healing Master Khong-hwei and Dharma Master Cheng. In the spring of 1982 through 1984, Stuart undertook a Buddhist bowing pilgrimage, 9 steps, 1 bow, from the Minnesota Zen Center to the border of Nebraska. Our discussion touched on many of these areas and went in depth on several. And as always, Stuart is the consummate gentleman and scholar. And at 71 years old, he's still moving well, working hard, staying focused. Enjoy. Welcome to the Transformations Podcast. Here, guests and I will share our transformative experiences and will explore how to find excellence in life. Stuart Alve Olson, thank you so much for joining me today on the Transformations Podcast. It's great to see you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So what are you doing? What a way to start. What are you doing?
God, I wish I could put that into a sentence.
Yeah.
My life is I used to put it, I really love what I do. I mean, it's doing the books and doing all the things that I've done over the years. I'm a very fortunate guy in that regard. So I just keep doing it. My joke is, there's a lot earlier in my life, there was a lot of things I wanted to do. Interestingly enough, all these things with Master Liang and all, being in the monastery and doing all these things, I felt kind of like, there's the old story about the mafia. Every time I try to get out, they pull me right back in. That's kind of how I feel. There's no escape. I mean,
There's no escape.
I love doing it. Therefore, I'm just one of those people that I wish I felt like I really worked hard, but I don't, because, well, I love what I do. Therefore, it never feels like work to me.
Yeah.
I get frustrated that there's not enough time in a day. I get really, it's kind of like, I want to just, I think I've done, I get to put this in context. I think I've done like 35 books so far. And I've got 16 sitting, I'm ready to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And plus I'm working on, this is going to sound odd. There's a number of things that have happened over the past few years that are kind of different for me. One is a really good student of mine who lives here in Phoenix as well now. His name is Fred Werner, and he's got 29 Broadway credits. He did Desirada, New York. He did, he's an older guy, so he did 7 Year Itch with Marilyn Monroe, but he also wrote the music for Duke of Hazzard. He's a great composer, but he really got enthralled when I did the book The Immortal, the
Yeah.
story of Li Cheng. So as we're talking right now, he has organized, and there's going to be, from what my understanding, a Broadway play based on Li Qingyuan and Yang's son. He's written 12 songs for it. He's got two Chinese writers working on the script, and we're going to be doing
So you're
actually,
talking a musical, not just a play, but a musical.
yeah, and it's a whole story about,
That's amazing.
yeah, and it seems kind of odd, because I never thought that's where that book would lead
Right.
me. And,
Right.
so it's just, I don't know, it was supposed to happen almost 2 years ago, but then the pandemic hit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Every Broadway completely shut down. Uh, so I don't know, and during that time, I also got hired to write a, a movie script, which
Hmm.
was called The Immortalists,
Okay.
obviously. And, but then pandemic hit, everything shut down. Uh, at the same time, I made a film in England in 2005, which is, I think it's called The Return of the Tigers. Went well in Europe, just not
Hmm.
here,
Yeah.
because Sky TV funded it.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was there. But they brought me over to England. It was fun, etc. But it led me into these people contacted me. They were going to make this kind of comic comedy kind of thing of uh, an old sword master, and I went and I did all the rehearsal stuff, all of that, and then bam, money disappeared. Nobody could do anything. So
Yeah.
I was just like devastated. But, like all things, there's good fortune and misfortune. It led me to teach on Zoom,
Yeah.
which
Ah,
at first I wasn't, I have to admit, I was a little suspect of it. But man, it just took off. And I got really busy, and it still is kind of continuing. I mean, it changed all these things with pandemics and all this. It changed everything for a lot of us.
yeah.
Uh, and I just, I wasn't, the nice part was I didn't have to travel to teach anymore
Right.
because I don't like traveling. I know that's going to sound odd, but I've done it. I did so much with Master Liang,
Right.
but it just seems uh, pesky and messy to me. I'm a homebody. I'd rather be here practicing or doing my books and, living
Yeah.
my little illusionary pure land over here. And,
Well, there's a whole stress piece with travel. You think it's very romantic and fun. You're going, but you have to plan, you have to pack, you've got to get there early, you've got to wait in lines. I mean, it's a
yeah, and
whole
it
thing.
takes, and I'm not, I look at my thing is if I travel, it takes me 2 weeks to get back into the mode of what I should be in. I
Right.
can't just plop back down and sit down and start doing the things I want to do. It takes me time
Right.
to uh, you know, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that I think basically my nature is pretty lazy, and
Your output does not make your nature lazy. It,
that's
it
what
contradicts it, but the idea of just being kind of slow and purposeful, I can see. You know.
yeah, it's just, but yeah, I don't feel, uh, I don't know, it's really odd in my situation because, I did life backwards. It's like most of my youth and right up into, you know, my 50s, and I was more involved in like being with Master Liang or being at the monastery or being on my bowing pilgrimage, those kind of things. So when I turned 60, I had to go to work.
Right.
Most people are thinking of retiring. I had to get busy
Yeah.
because one thing I've learned, there's an old Zen story about the student that goes out and sits on a rock in the middle of a stream, and I'm making a long story short here, but the teacher comes out and says, okay, don't expect food to float across the water for you. Don't expect clothes to crawl up your back for you. And all these things. And so, yeah, I felt like when I got, especially when I turned 60, is when I got really, really busy. Uh,
Yeah.
Everything else up to that was kind of just a preamble. So I feel kind of way like I did things a little bit backwards, but so be it. Like I said, I, for the most part, really enjoy my life. You know, I don't necessarily enjoy the world I live in that much,
Right. Right. Right.
but uh,
Right.
my little world, as long that's probably why I like being a homebody.
Yeah.
You know, as long as I'm in my little world, everything seems to be fine.
You
It's when
can
you get out
control
there.
for your own environment and your own
Yeah,
space, but
yeah,
not
yeah.
the greater.
The world has gotten. I'm not like I'm not very political. I'm not very any of that stuff.
Yeah.
What I've just seen is, and I could sum it up with, there used to be a time when all the great buildings in this world were spiritual buildings.
Right.
Now they're money temples.
Yeah.
That's all they are. They're just money temples. And that has an effect on everybody. Uh, and it's, I've never saw anything wrong with money. I just see, what some people do with it that's wrong.
Right.
and and so I don't know. I feel, again, I was very fortunate uh, to have the ability, to have the experiences, and to do, just the ability to live with Master Liang for so many years, the ability to go live at City of 10,000 Buddhas, the ability to be able to be on a bowing pilgrimage. Um, all of those things um, I feel incredibly grateful for. Uh, and, I still don't get it. I'll be honest with you. I don't get it because, you know, looking at, to be point blank, obviously with the last name Olson, I'm a Norwegian guy from Minnesota. Uh, I don't know what and why I end up being able to study and meet and become friends with various people that were really skilled, way beyond me. And it just, I've never really I mean, yeah, I could say karma, et cetera, but that comes off a little egotistical. Because I'm sure I did lots of bad stuff too. It wasn't just, I mean, I'm here in a human body, so yeah,
Right. Yeah.
I didn't do everything right. So,
Right.
but
Right.
yeah, but I feel incredibly fortunate for most of the things in my life, and it's I haven't, obviously when we're young, we make all sorts of mistakes,
Oh yeah.
and uh, I don't know if I call them regrets, you know, but I wish some things, just never happened. uh, and again, it's the old Chinese saying, within misfortune, there's good fortune. And
Yeah.
within good fortune, there's always misfortune.
Yeah.
So back in 1988, I was hit by a train.
For
And
real.
yeah, I spent a year and a half trying to recover from that. Uh, Fortunately, uh, my doctor, he was the director of a hospital up in Duluth, Minnesota. He was also a student of TT and I. And we did things that, I mean, the original doctors told me I would never use my right leg again. And Neil came along and we did this. There was not one cast put on my body. They were all braces. we'd open them up a degree because, the idea that unless blood gets into a joint, it can't heal. And
Yeah.
I mean, but this went on. I got addicted to morphine for a while. Well, I had to. I had too
Right.
many.
Of course.
Yeah. And, I still think it's one of the greatest things ever invented, but because you do. I mean, it's an amazing state. But no, I just, I looked at that as misfortune, but actually it motivated me. See, I was just a healthy, energetic young guy but this made mortality
Yeah.
real. Because we all go through, when we're younger, we feel immortal.
Well, death seems so far because when you're 18, your grandparents who might be 60 seem really old. But once you become a parent or you get to those ages, you're like, when
Yeah.
I was 17 last week, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I think most of us guys never really get over being 19.
Yeah,
We always think we are. But
yeah.
no, it's like me. I have memories of when I was 8, 9 years. I mean, I have memories all the way back till I was 6 months old, which freaks my mother out. Uh, but the idea was, I remember being young and like some of my relatives, they were in their 30s, and I remember saying things like, "God, I never want to get that old." You
Right.
know, and then you get to be 30 and then you start looking at people in their 60s as being old and I don't want to. Then you get to 60 and then you start seeing everybody in their 80s and 90s as
You're
being
like,
really,
I'll never go.
yeah. And then, I mean, I just turned 73 and, I'm not a big fan of saying, oh, I want to live, you know, 200 years or any. No, it's like, if it's the case, here's how I look at it. Li Qingyuan could be 250 years old because he didn't have to pay bills.
Right. That's
Seriously.
exactly it. You didn't have to
Yeah,
work all day,
right. I don't want if
politics.
yeah, and I'm not capable. I'm one of I admit it. As much as I love Taoism and all that, put me in the forest, I'll die in a week. I don't know how to I wouldn't know how to live there.
You got your phone, you get Uber Eats, you order a
Yeah,
mattress from Amazon, a little blow up
yeah,
mattress you can tuck away.
yeah, yeah. So, it's just I'm not looking forward.
Yeah,
And my opinion is there's an old Chinese statement I love. It's a greeting where they say, may you have youthfulness within your old age.
mm,
And as long as I feel youthful,
yeah,
yeah, I want to be here.
yeah,
But no, if something goes awry, no, I don't want to struggle with all that junk of, having people try to keep me alive for no good reason.
right,
Uh, and that's partially, my my uh, my love for these things. Even though I should qualify here because, yeah, I have a pretty extensive Buddhist background, and I love Buddhism. I just don't think I'm a very good one. And, I don't, I couldn't become a monk, even though I
right,
lived there. I realized no, I can't do that.
right,
Uh, but Taoism, because there's a difference. Buddhism, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but the idea is, life is suffering, or maybe a better translation is
right,
life is dissatisfaction. Uh, but Taoism approaches it from life is to be appreciated. Now, both are right. I just like the mindset of appreciation better than
yeah,
thinking about my suffering, uh,
right.
because that gets a little, too self-involved, I guess. Oh, poor me, I
Well, your
don't,
vibration stays low if you're thinking about suffering. But when you
yeah,
appreciate, your vibration rises, right?
yeah,
And you feel better about things, even though the world's in turmoil and you maybe
well,
not pay your bills, but you feel a
yeah,
little better.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like when I was on my bowing pilgrimage. And there was a guy that would come out, and his name was Tai Cashman. He actually worked for the Dalai Lama Greenpeace. He had 7 PhDs. He was a former Jesuit priest, really intelligent guy. But he'd come out and he'd bring lunch when I was bowing, and we'd sit and talk. One day he brings out a magazine called Geo Magazine.
Hmm.
And in it was an article. He said, I know you're going to want to read this. And what it was an article written about a Japanese monk in Japan, also on a bowing pilgrimage.
Huh.
So I could relate to what this guy's going through. But the story, and I'm making it shorter here, but there was a woman who saw him bowing. And now I know what it's like to be out there in the gravel. You don't smell that well, you don't look that well, your clothes are tattered, etc., etc. But this woman comes out and she confronts this monk. And she says, what are you doing? And he said that he was bowing. And she's going, why are you bowing? He goes, because I'm grateful. And she looked at him and she goes, grateful for what? And the monk responded, well, ultimately nothing, but it's a wonderful state of mind. And that summed it up for me. I'm really glad he brought that, because that's exactly, I was out there under the premise of saying I'm bowing for world peace, which was kind of arrogant on some levels. And, because I actually quit bowing. I was somewhere in just getting through South Dakota, and some guy in a big old dirty smoky car with a great big dog in it pulls up across the road, and he goes, and big beard, and he's like, what are you doing? And I go, I'm bowing. And he goes, bowing for what? And I went, world peace. And then he looked at me, and just like it went through me, he just went, who said it wasn't peaceful?
Right.
And I go, thought about it. I did. I'm the one that said it. So that kind of played on me. And, ideally I was thinking I was going to go to California. But I realized, 2.5 years to get through Minnesota to the border of South Dakota. California was somewhere to 10 to 15 years down the road at that rate.
That was like 1982. You did that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And at 9 steps, 1 bow. Is that
Yes.
what does that mean? You step 9 times and then bow?
Okay. If I had been an ordained monk, I would have done 3 steps.
Oh.
But the lay people, which I was one of, I was what they call a upasaka, and I had the general rule was as lay people did 9 steps.
Okay.
But nonetheless, on a good day, I could maybe almost get a mile on a good day. That was really stepping
only up and down.
Yeah. But no, it was.
Now that took you 2 years, right?
2.5 years I was out there.
Right.
I didn't bow during the wintertime. Not on the road. I went back and I went and bowed in Master Liang's garage during the wintertime. It was too dangerous. You got to there's some things here that when I first went on and said I was going to do this, me and a number of other people probably thought that I wasn't going to live through this, that somebody would do me in being in Buddhist robes going down the road. Now, but the reality of it was the police were my best friends. They'd come out and talk to me. They were really nice, protected me. Almost every town I went through, the mayor would come out and sit down and have lunch with me.
Wow.
I found I had a new appreciation for Catholics because they actually understood what I was doing. There's enough of their stuff in their practices to realize, I'm not all that different. And I got a lot of respect. I only had 2 incidences where it was kind of, I had some kids throw bottles at me, and I had another guy that I think he wanted to stab me, but not really. He was And he confessed about to me. He comes up and just starts telling me about how he's cheating farmers out of money. And he goes, I got a knife in my pocket. And I just stayed calm and yeah, okay. Well, now
Hmm.
not a good living. You should go find another job.
Right.
He ended up just kind of, hey, nice talking to you. He got in his car and drove away.
Hmm.
But it's, I say those things, but you will notice out of all the books I've written, I've never written about my bowing
Right.
pilgrimage. I can't. It is so, there's such things that within it that were, in my experience, were very powerful, but very personal.
Hmm.
I can talk about aspects of things I did, but I don't want to sit down and write a book, partially because I'm a little ashamed
Hmm.
uh, of because if I did write the book, I'd have to call it Spiritual Olympics because it's kind of like I realized I didn't want people to think that cultivating required this kind of action
Right.
because it doesn't. And I remember when I did finally decide to stop, I went back to the Zen Center in Minneapolis where I actually started it. And I told everybody, I said, I realize that the real cultivators are you guys. You have jobs, you have families, you get up every morning, you're here by 5, you're meditating till 7, you go off to work, you go to work, you come back, and you're back here by 5 again, sitting, listening to sutra lectures. And you're within all that, you have your jobs, you have your families. And here I am out there, with, I mean, I've got everybody following me, different TV stations and newspapers. Uh, and to me, that was actually kind of like a little bit arrogant because I don't think cultivation should be judged like that.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of the guy, looking for the gold medal, so to speak.
Yeah.
And therefore, it was always, I just couldn't, even though I had many, many great experiences that really elevated me in what I call my spiritual development, I can't really write about it. Uh, and like I said, I was a little bit embarrassed about the fact that I was putting on such a show. In many, I mean, maybe that's unfair to me to say that about myself, but that's kind of how I felt a lot of times was, you know, this is just showing off.
But
You
it's
know,
also hard work. I mean, 2.5 years showing off is 30 minutes.
yeah,
2.5 years is dedication.
yeah, but
And but I understand what you're saying. What were
yeah,
some of the, I mean, I'm sure in that amount of time, like you said, there's transformations going on within you. Just even walking that far without the bowing, or bowing that many times without the walking, but having to count to 9, go down, bow, come back up, count, 9 steps down, come back up. I would imagine that it's a little painful at times, uh, on the knees and the joints and the low back, but then also you get into kind of a rhythm if you're not being harassed or talked to, where then you're kind of, it's almost like a trance state perhaps.
yeah. There's a lot of states you go through. I mean, I had experiences for a period of time where, and I'm not trying to elevate anything here. It was my experience.
Yeah.
I felt like my feet weren't, I mean, like I was floating.
Mm.
I just, everything felt so easy. Then there's other times, I mean, I actually had to start wearing knee pads like guys in concrete.
Yeah.
I had to have them on my elbows. Everything was getting torn apart. I was that Thai Cashman. We actually joked around about, starting a, a sporting goods store for bowing people.
The Buddhist, the
Yeah,
Buddhist,
so we could
the
sell
Zen
them.
sports shop.
Yeah, and but yeah, and it there were it's really fascinating because you go through, and plus, see, I took a vow to bury every dead animal that I came across.
Oh.
I had no idea of the killing field that goes along on highways.
Hmm.
And there were all sorts of animals. And uh, there were just experiences with that really kind of changed me because I never really thought of beforehand that it would be because I had this little shovel and it seems like every day I was digging 4 or 5 holes.
Wow.
Uh,
That's
and
4 or 5 in 1 mile. If you're doing a
yeah,
mile a day, that's
yeah,
quite a bit of
yeah. And I'm
work.
just doing one side of the road. I'm sure there
Right.
were more on the other side. Uh, but it was really interesting because I remember one of, and this probably means more to me than anybody else, but I was bowing, and just as I bowed down, I could see right off to my right side, about a foot, there was a frog on his back with his legs, and I could, he must have been hit something.
Mm.
So I mark my spot. I get up and I go find this old milk carton, and I took some water and I put it and I put some and I made a little house for him to
Oh,
be inside that little, so he's protected. And I put him offside the road. And I didn't think much of it. It was just like, I hope he lives, but that's about the best I can do for him. And I bowed, and about 20 minutes later, the whole road in front of me is nothing but frogs.
okay.
And they're
Well,
all looking at me and croaking.
wow.
And I got up and I sat there and I just go, what is this? Because there must have been 300 to 400 frogs just
Wow.
sitting on the road
So they
looking at
got the message,
me.
and
That was my feeling. And then I sat there and I recited the Da Bei Jo. And then I said, you guys should all go off and do your little frog things. And within 15 minutes, I kind of dispersed and I never saw him again. So there were things like that would occur that, I'm not trying to give myself any, because I still felt like this kid from Minnesota, and I still have all my prejudices and all that kind of junk that goes through. So it just took me by surprise. Different experiences that I would have with animals and people, um, and it and especially in the sense of how it changed me in the sense I found out how really good people are. That was the one that really changed me because there were people that uh, had I not been out there, I would have had different views of them. And I got to meet everybody from, just about every walk of life out there because a lot of people were just very curious. But they were very sweet. And uh, I'm presenting them with something, it's kind of like I remember one day I was on this very lonely country road. All of a sudden I see this pickup truck drive up and he parks right in front of me. He gets out of the car and he goes, I don't mean to disturb you, but I want to tell you, when you get up over that hill at the junction, there's a restaurant there. And when you're done, you come in there and you can get anything you want.
oh,
And I'm
wow.
going, well, thank you. And he gets in his truck and he drives away. So when I get up to that junction, I really do need water. I need to fill up my canteen and stuff. And so I walk into this restaurant and it's filled in guys with bib overalls and their wives. And, it's just completely farm community. And this guy, as I walk in, and there I am in my robes, etc., totally out of place. And
Yeah.
this guy says to me, uh, you know, he says, he says, I'm sorry, but you can have anything you want. It's free. He just goes, but you got to tell me, why are you doing this? And all that would come to my little brain was I looked at him and I said, this is much easier than being married. And the whole place just started cracking
I'll
up.
bet.
And he's like slapping his knee. That's right, kid. And he's going, and they became my friends.
Yeah.
They even did a picnic for me a couple days later.
Wow.
And, it was that kind of uh, responses that here again, context. I'm a bald headed kid in robes, with rosary beads, everything. And this is not my world, even though I was born in it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But uh, that really was, despite the humor in that, it was really a great experience for me because it connected me with people that I would have never, because they actually would come out and stop and say hi. And, uh, I became part of their, because I was in there. I mean, you think about, I was in their community for about 10
Right.
days, you
Yeah.
know, um, and another one that I had that is really of interest. It's funny, but it's true. I'm bowing and it's a really hot day. And right next to me pulls up this station wagon that needs a muffler.
Yeah.
And it's stinky. And I get up from my bow, and there's a guy driving, and there's like 6 kids in the car. And he looks at me and he goes, I have one question for you. And I go, yeah, what is it? He goes, did they ever find Buddha's body?
What- like that's
And
the
I go,
question on his mind, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I say, well, they found relics. I'm just being honest. They found these bone relics that, are dispersed. And goes, and he looks at me and goes, well, they never found Jesus's body. What does that tell you? And all I could do is I looked at him, I go, Jimmy Hoffa is a god.
Jimmy.
I mean, what? And I was actually kind of disturbed because there's these children. Then he goes, I'm the Seventh Day Adventist
Uh,
minister in town, and I just wanted to come out. You Buddhas, they found Buddha's body, blah blah blah. And he thought, and I just looked at him. I said, if you're basing your faith on whether they find a person's body or not, that seems kind of weak. And I said, the other thing is, there's kids here. I'm not trying to, I think you should come back without them and we can have a discussion, but I don't want to do anything to disturb their faith.
yeah.
And, I don't want to make them Buddhist. That's not my purpose. Uh, but he drove away, leaving me a lot of polluted air to breathe for a while. I never saw him again.
Yeah.
But it just struck me as, you know, this is how bad it is that you're basing your faith on things like that rather than anything really internal. So these are kind of like, I'm just telling these stories because they were kind of like daily occurrences with things. Some of them really sweet, some of them really sad. Like just quickly, I was bowing through this small little town and there was a little park and there was a girl on the bench, probably about 20 feet away from me. And I saw her long before I got there, but she was crying. And so as I just bowed by quietly. And the whole time that I'm bowing, as I got nearer, I could hear her sobbing.
Mhm.
And I never said a word to her, but I knew why she was crying.
Mm.
Whatever I was doing had such an effect on her. Because I had an older guy who was a World War II vet that did the same thing. He was sat there watching me and he cried.
Wow.
But he said, he goes, what you're doing is what I should have done instead of going to France and killing people. I mean, say what you want to say about that. That's,
Right.
I mean, we're all lucky that he did
Right.
level. But the other side is that you can understand personally and spiritually why
Yeah.
that just, it got to him just watching me do that. So the bowing pilgrimage, and like I said, uh, I could write a whole bunch of books because I kept a journal the whole time I was out there too. Um, but I just can't bring myself to. I like talking about it in this regard, but to actually sit down and write a book about it, um, I'm not sure that's how I want uh, people to look at Buddhist practices.
Yeah.
I really don't, because I mean, I really, and I'm, in the end, I guess I could say I'm a failure. I mean, my original idea was, like I said, to go to California because I didn't have any idea how long this was going to take. But I knew I didn't want to be out there 15 years either.
Right.
That wasn't something I
Now,
wanted.
where did you stay along the route? Because obviously, for 2 years, you're like Cain from Kung Fu, just
Yeah.
kind of walking the earth.
I
And
had a little tent,
okay,
and every night I'd go try to find some bush,
to pop it up.
yeah, to put it behind so nobody would see me. I mean, there were times when different farmers would say, "My farm is up here on the right. You're welcome to use any part of it to camp out on." I had one guy, he was actually the minister of this church,
Hmm.
and his son, the little kid, he must have been about 7 years old. He told me that his son saw me on TV. The TV station showed me bowing down the road. And he said his kid was adamant that he had to come and give me a quarter so I
Oh,
could get food.
that's awesome.
And yeah, and so the little kid, before I talked to his father, the minister, the kid came up and he actually bowed. I mean, this is strange. Here's a kid whose father is a Christian minister. This kid comes and he bows in front of me and he puts out the quarter and he goes, "This is for you."
Wow.
And it broke my heart. But the father, he started talking to me and then he just said, uh, "I would like you, if you want," he said, "you could stay. We have an area in the basement and there's a shower and you can, if you want, you could sleep there tonight. No problem." And that was a Saturday night. Next morning was church. So he comes down, he invites me, he goes, "Before you go bow, he wanted me to sit in the church." So I sat in the back in my robes and he made a point of talking about me during his sermon and about how uh, because he really admired the idea of what I was doing. And even though I could see people staring at me and not, there's probably a lot of people in there that wish I would just curl up and die somewhere. But um, for the most part, it was a really good kind of reception. Of, and it was, again, almost every day. Something like this occurred. And that's another thing. To write it, it would have to be, that thick. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so much that occurred. But it was for me. I didn't bow to write a book. I bowed for me because I felt a real need to do something like this. But you said something that, yeah, I mean, I grew up watching Kwai Chan Caine.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still think it's one of the best things they ever did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Buddhist. Actually, the show was Taoist. When you listen to it, the philosophy they're using,
It's
they
Daoist.
couldn't work it as a Shaolin monk. Really, he would have been too hard, and so they turned him into a wandering Taoist. And what's interesting is, I'll just bring this up quickly, is
Yeah.
inside Kung Fu was a martial art based idea, but there
Hmm.
was very little of it and what was in there was very soft
Right.
and it was very, exacting, right? It wasn't, the big Kung Fu fights. What was interesting is that show, because it was more philosophical about Kung Fu than it was
Right.
Kung Fu. And it was like the number one show, one of the number one shows, blah, blah, blah. What happens? They all go violent. All Kung Fu shows after that
Went violent.
went violent. And
Yeah.
they never went back to what that show was trying to present, this kind of philosophical side to martial art. And they never, so in some ways, yeah, I wasn't quite Chang Kane, but the idea was is that yeah, I some people brought that similarity up to me, and I would always reject it, saying no, I have shoes.
I have shoes, and I'm on the concrete, not the desert.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So, but yeah,
I,
it's for my purposes, I grew up with that. I'm like a lot of, similar to you. We grow up as these
yeah,
Caucasian in
out
our
of place,
society,
out of
but
time.
we find, you know, we went to another culture,
Yeah,
and I get a little shy sometimes because, or not shy, but uh, kind of off put, because there's this whole thing about, what it went through with activism about not appropriating another culture.
yeah.
That's all I've done.
That's my whole life too, right? And
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't leave it. But I think the problem is everybody is so sensitive now and on edge about culture and identity that they say, stop appropriating other cultures' thing. And I say, I'm
yeah,
not appropriating anything. I'm respecting it and embracing it. That's
yeah.
different from, I think, just like
Well,
appropriating.
the way I put it is only people of my own ethnicity will sometimes have a problem with me.
That's
But
correct.
when it comes to Asians,
They,
they're going,
yes,
wow, you're interested in this? I
you
mean,
can't believe it.
they take it as a compliment that
Right.
I am involved in their culture. So, but yeah, this is also, you see it in so much.
Yeah.
This is just, these are ideas that come and go.
Yeah.
And, and the other thing is people don't really realize uh, how much of other cultures our culture is. I mean, even language. I mean, people don't realize this, but every time you use the word cash, you're speaking Chinese. We borrowed it from string of cash. We took the word, it's a Cantonese
Yeah.
meaning money. Uh, but our language is based on so many
So
cultures,
many languages, yeah, and cultures. Yeah.
like alcohol, it's Arabic. We don't really sometimes understand how much we're appropriating from everybody else.
Right.
And the other thing I have a problem with is, if you don't want to appropriate or have anything like that, then, why are you going to Japanese restaurants and eating their food?
Right.
Why are you doing this? You know, why are you buying clothes that are made
In
in China?
China.
Yeah. Why, think about what you're doing before you open your mouth and start yelling at
Yeah.
people. But I can't say that I've had any huge problems with it. And I had the unique problem of I traveled with Master Liang a lot. And I would say countless times, people like at airports, the ticket people, they go, so do you want your father to be sitting? And I'd look at him, I go, do I look Chinese? And they would always go, oh yeah, come to think of
Come to
it.
think of it.
I was so, embedded with him that people
Right.
kind of just took it as he must be my father, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I don't think I look Chinese. Uh, but students have said I've kind of morphed into him a little bit that
Well,
I,
just seeing you now, and when we first got on, I thought, boy, you've got some of his features, like at
yeah,
a first glance, with if I squint my eyes a little, like your mouth and jaw looks a little bit like his,
I
you know,
understand.
and that's what happens when you're around somebody so long and
Oh,
working with their energy. And
and I can imitate him
yeah,
perfectly. I spent too much time with him. So yeah,
yeah,
if I want to be T.T. Leon, I can be him.
Yeah.
uh, simply because I just spent so much time with that man.
So for our viewers who don't know, T.T. Liang was a famous Tai Chi master who was a student of Cheng, correct? And if you would like to give a little more background there on how you met him and came to basically become his apprentice who had to steal his art to capture a title of your book.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a little bit, please.
Okay. Well, sure. First of all, you got to keep in mind, TT was an incredible man. He he rose up through the ranks. He was actually the highest ranking uh, uh, British custom official.
Hmm.
He worked for the British. He controlled most of the eastern seaboard. He was
Wow.
only one man higher than him, and that was this Mr. Livingston, who lived mostly in London. But TT was in charge of all this, which is why he said, you know, he said its teacher mastered poetry, medicine, Tai Chi, painting. And TT goes, yes, he did. But he said, I mastered opium, alcohol, cigarettes, womanizing, and gambling. He goes, but
So
he said,
he's the master of the second five elements.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But he said, but it's true. He
Yeah,
said, but then I outlived him too.
yeah.
I mean, he did. TT was supposed to die at age 45. He
Wow.
was a really wealthy man uh,
Hmm.
in China. And, that's another whole side of the story. But the thing for me was I was coming back from the monastery back to, my family's all from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I came back and was going to prepare because I wanted to bow from the Minnesota Zen Center. There's a teacher there, Roshi Katagiri, who was just, him and I were really good friends, really enjoyed him. And so anyway, I was going to start my bowing from them. Now I was thinking, uh, it would be nice. I didn't really realize a lot of things that I was going to be getting into, but I thought, wow, I should learn Tai Chi. So I have this other exercise to do while I'm out there, in my spare time. Which, so I went and there was a Tai Chi place, studio. And I went there, but I really didn't like the teacher. I thought he was kind of a creep and not really being honest. He didn't have the skills. I had been around enough people, out at the monastery to see really good Tai Chi and didn't think he was. But one of his students, this Vern Peterson, I really liked him. Him and I became instant friends and still are to this day. Uh, and so he said, well, if you want to just learn Tai Chi, I'll teach it to you. So I started learning from him. But about 2 months into that learning, uh, he told me one day, he says, do you know who Master T.T. Liang is? And I went, yeah, I read his book about 6 months ago. And he goes, he just moved to St. Cloud. You want to go see him? And yeah, because I was more interested. I knew he translated that book of his was translations. And that's what I was interested in. So I said, yeah, let's go see him, because maybe he can tell me something. Anyway, TT and I we shared the same kind of sick sense of humor. we basically we just got along really, really well. And so I went up like 3 times to have lessons with him each week. And finally, on that third one, he said, and he finally caught on. He said, so you're going to do 9 steps, 1 bow? And I went, yeah, I'm going to leave in late March. And this was like November. And he said, why don't you come and live here until you go?
Mm.
And he said, maybe I can show you some Chinese. Well, he did, but he also got me up every morning to follow along with Tai Chi that I didn't. But the problem was for me is he was 82, I was 32. And I'm not, he would try to show me how to use Tai Chi, as a means of self-defense. And I couldn't, I didn't know anybody in their 60s that could do what he was doing. I could not get the better of him ever, no matter how much effort I put into it. And that impressed me. And I just decided he's 82 and he's this healthy and he's that active. I want half of what he's got. So I kind of made a promise. I said, when I'm done, can I stay here during the winters and bow in your garage, but also learn Tai Chi? And he said, yeah, fine. So that's how it all kind of started.
Wow.
But it became, and now he really became like the father I never had. I'm not trying to, blast my biological father, but he was an alcoholic. I had issues with him. But T.T. was like the father I never had.
Right.
And I grew very close to him. And, I look back on it now and it kind of hit me. And this is recently, it was like 2 years ago. I got a call from a guy. He said, my name is Mr. Wang, and I live in China. And he goes, I called, I was looking for you because people told me if I wanted to find out information about Dung Sai Liang, that I should talk to you. And he goes, I called the Jin Sun Tai Chi Club, which is like the big one in Boston, been there forever. And they said to him, well, if you want to know about T.T. Liang, you have to talk to his godson, Stuart Olson.
His guns.
And that's the first time I heard that.
Wow.
And I didn't know that the Chinese community looked at me that way.
Yeah.
But the story was kind of funny because I found out that, because T.T. was really wealthy when he lived in China.
Mm.
He had lots of concubines. And this was a great grandson of his, a whole family that I knew nothing about, that T.T. never mentioned to me. And because what it was is his grandma was one of T.T.'s concubines, and she just wanted to know what happened to him.
Right.
And he was the first member of their family to actually leave China for the United States. So it was put on him to find out what happened to Dung Sai Liang. But the part of the story that got to me was, I didn't know. I met lots of like William Chen and there. I became friends with Jimmy Yang and all these guys that knew T.T. But it was kind of odd to hear, that the Chinese community was referring to me as the godson, which to me is a real honor. But I never heard that before. T.T. would sometimes call me his adopted son. And then he would immediately after that say, but you're an asshole. And, because he wouldn't keep things straight. He had a great sense of humor. But anyway, that's how it began. And it began not with me wanting to learn Tai Chi. That I developed simply because of his skills and what I just had no context beforehand. He really could take care of himself. Yeah, I never looked at him as a martial artist because he kind of nixed that idea. He said that's the mistake most Tai Chi people make. They want to imitate the Kung Fu karate people.
Yeah.
But that's not what Tai Chi is about. He goes, read the text. It's about yielding, learning how to lose. So I kind of redefined the idea of, I don't use the word self-defense in connection with Tai Chi. I use the term defense against the self.
Yeah.
T.T. taught me it's your mistake. If you get beat up, don't blame anybody else. Blame the fact that you didn't know how to get out of it, that you didn't know. It's not about beating other people up. What's that going to solve? Nothing. But learn not to get hurt. That has a lot of, and it has more meaning than just somebody wanting to fight you. It has meaning everything in our daily life. It's, just one simple example of how we use tension and stress. Think about somebody in an office with a pencil, and they keep breaking the lead on the pencil, and then they go, God, why do they buy such cheap pencils? no, you're pressing too hard, and we do that with a lot of things. We're the ones creating our own injuries, so to speak. And so T.T. was, despite, he had one of the most incredible backgrounds, 15 incredibly great teachers, because he was rich. He could have, and they wanted him as a student. He was very famous in Asia.
Yeah.
So, but I was very fortunate for that, because being Buddhist and all, I didn't want to be a fighter. I really didn't, but I really liked that concept of yielding and learning how to lose in order to win.
Right.
And I could just see it. If somebody's going to push on a wall and that wall disappears, they're in trouble. They hurt themselves. It's not
Right.
me doing it. I just got out of the way, But I think the biggest, as T.T. said, the biggest skill in Tai Chi is to learn not to put yourself in positions of fighting.
Mm-hmm.
That is an art and a skill all of its own. And, I remember my friend, I mentioned him, Roshi Katagiri. They built the Zen Center in Minneapolis, and he went down to this little shopping area once. He was in his Zen robes and everything, and some guy came up and, because Katagiri said when he was young, he learned judo. He said this guy came up and said, "Give me your watch," right? He said, which was, valuable to him. But he said, "I did my best judo that day." And I go, "Really? What did you do?" And he went like this.
Yeah.
I gave him the watch. There was no fight. He goes, he said, "My teacher taught me, if you can have no fight, that's the best judo." So, but see, in our culture, martial art films and all the things with Hollywood and they've distorted it. Nobody can really do that. And you watch all these things about all these techniques, whether you're, I forget names of shows because I don't watch much, but, they have all this idea of these really great, incredible fighters. Honestly, life is not like that.
Yeah.
It's just not. Most of those guys would be shot long before they got to do anything. It's better just not to be there. It's better not to be at the other end of a gun. It's better not to be face to face with people that want to do harm. And to me, yeah, it's defense against the self, because I'm the one that makes the mistake. I put myself there.
Yeah.
So karma.
Sometimes instant karma.
Yeah, but I've never really there's only a couple times I've actually had to kind of use what T.T. taught me, but mostly it came down to wherever we went and taught, T.T. would, he had this thing where he would find the biggest guy in the class, and he would look at him and goes, "I will give you $100 if you can crush this Stuart into a pancake." Every time. He did it every time. Now, fortunately, I'd learned enough about, people's centers and how to deal with it that, it wasn't any great skill. I look at Tai Chi as great physics.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a martial artist to use it. But anyway, I would, be able to get them down, and the result of that is that all weekend nobody would bother me. I could teach. I could go through, and because the big guy went down, so they're not, the other ones are, it's stupid because the big guy just didn't have a sense of balance. He wasn't trained. And so but I remember when I first asked T.T. about that, "Why are you doing that? I'm going to get hurt." And then he went, "No," he said, "then everybody will leave you alone and we can teach peacefully." And it really came in handy because I had another student who came up. He was a really incredible research. He actually ran that organization called MD Anderson down in Houston. Really big wig in the cancer world, but he was also he brought me down to Houston because he came up and stayed with TT and I, and he brought me down to teach. What he didn't tell me was that most of the students in the class were either Dallas Cowboys or students of George Foreman.
Oh, geez.
I'm all of about 5'5" at best. All of these guys are like 6'4".
Right.
I mean, they're just, and I mean, I managed to get through the weekend, and I managed to not coming off looking too much like a fool. But it was those experiences with TT out on the road that helped me get through that weekend, because I really didn't think I was going to make it. you know, but anyway, it's just TT in his just, I don't know how to put it, but I had never met anybody, and I'm not saying this right, but he was the most when it came to this stuff, he was the most skilled person I had ever. I was around a lot of martial art people,
Yeah.
but I never found anybody with his. He could do things so quickly and look like nothing. I mean, there's lots of stories from Yang Jingming and William Chen and B.B. Chan, all these people, Joe Sung Hwa, etc. I mean, they were all looking at me like, you have to learn this, what TT called bungda, which was this ability to take you off your center in an instant because you're on your tiptoes. And then an 8-year-old can knock you over. And they're going, we never quite learned that from him. They were all pushing me because they all felt it, they all experienced it, and even though those guys, I mean, William, they're all very skilled.
Oh, for sure.
But they also, the respect that they gave TT wherever we went was unbelievable. But then at first, I didn't know his history back in Taiwan with William and Yang Jingming and all these Joseph. I didn't know the history of these people with him. But I came to learn it over time. And then I started understanding why they respected him so much. But, like they all said, he was a harsh guy in Taiwan. He got really nice when he moved to the United States. Truthfully.
Yeah.
Because he said in Taiwan, he had this, I mean, he was playing tennis with Chiang Kai-shek, and, he knew Sun Yat-sen, all these people. So everybody kind of had this, he was in the elite category. So people kind of feared him, and he had no patience with people, when it came to learning Tai Chi from him. As one guy said, he would hurt you before he helped you. But when he got to the United States, and I talked with TT about this, and he said, in Taiwan and China, I was a big wig. He said, when I came to the United States, I was a gook. And he goes, people would run into me and push me and say, get out of my way, and all that. He said they didn't know who I was. So they had no fear about me or about what I might do. And he said, so they treated me like this poor little Chinese guy. And he said, I realized I had to learn to adapt. And I think my biggest thing about respecting him falls into the category of, because he's the only person I ever met that actually changed 180 degrees. Most of us talk about change, but that relates to diet. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do that. But to change your nature.
Yeah, 180. Coming here then was almost like, transformative nature of being out of place.
Yeah,
he was no longer the person he was, and he had to reinvent himself to exist here. And that maybe the Tai Chi made him flexible to roll off, ward back, ward off, roll
Yeah,
back, press and push,
yeah,
to yield, to be able to
yeah,
do it. Yeah.
yeah. And I saw that in a lot of people that came out of Asia that would come and visit us. Because I would ask them, was he always like this? And they're going, oh no. He goes, back then you didn't dare say hello,
Wow.
unless you bowed first or something. It's like they go, he's a completely different person. They're going, you know, uh, one guy put it, this Mr. Gao, he said he was in Taiwan. He was like the worst, most strict Confucianist you ever wanted to meet.
Mm.
I go, I come here now and he's like the perfect Taoist. It's like he did, and that I had to look at that and just go, wow, that really deserves respect.
Yeah.
But I saw him do a lot of things too, within his family and with people. He just learned how to handle situations really well, and I tried my best to learn from them. Uh, that'll be judged later on whether I did or not. But
Yeah.
uh, uh, I it wasn't just what I put it. I learned more with TT about how to live than how to do Tai Chi.
Right.
Truthfully, I mean, I learned a lot of Tai Chi, but his examples of how to be a good human being, which I haven't always lived up to, but I try. Um, but those were the lessons that have meant the most. Because from him, I guess the one thing I've really learned, and one of the things that I would really like to talk about, is all of these things. You learn Tai Chi, you do meditation, you do all these things. They're all about living well.
Mm-hmm.
But Taoism goes into the whole art of dying well.
It does.
Because all of us are going to die. I'm sorry. I believe in immortality, but I believe in the way the old Daoist Chang Tuan put it, spiritual immortality.
Yes.
I can live forever in my spirit if I cultivate it and wake it up and all that. But my physical body, that's going to go.
Yeah.
No question. But the real question is, am I going to die well or not? Because I looked at TT, he died by he took a bath, put on his new pajamas, put his bed up, so he was sitting kind of upright, passed away.
Wow.
I've known 3 other teachers that did that same thing.
Mm.
But I've witnessed 2 deaths. They're not pretty.
No.
They're ugly. And there's all sorts of terrible things that happen when a person dies. And, but you think about 911 calls, ambulances, people crying, screaming, you got all these strangers around you doing stuff. That's not a good way to die. And, I want to die peacefully. I want to just stop, and the nice part about, I don't know if it's nice or not, maybe I shouldn't say that, but, when TT turned 102, I teased him. And we were on the phone and I said, this is his birthday. I go, wow, you made it to 102. And he goes, yes. He's all boastful. And I go, and you always told me you'd live to be 100. And he goes, yes, I had to prove my art was good. And then I go, but now you're 102. I think you're showing off.
Yeah.
And he literally went, oh, goddamn, do not want to show off. That's not good. Not too good. No, can't show off. 3 months later, he dies. And I'm not blaming myself because we were joking. I'm not going to get that serious about it. But I think, and I saw the decline when he reached, 100 and a half. That's when I could really see the decline in him. He wasn't the same guy. Old age got to him. And he admitted to me, he said, the first half of my life, I did nothing but abuse myself. He said, and I had to work the last half just to remain healthy. And he goes, but I could have went much further, but I got lazy. He said, this is all very hard work.
Right.
And he said, and he admitted, he said, I got kind of lazy. He said, after I turned 70, because he had that statement, life begins at 70. And when I asked him about it, he first said to me, he said, well, that's because I got Social Security, free money. And, but no, then he just said, well, think about it. When you turn 70, you're for the most part, you're not thinking about income and all of that stuff anymore.
It's your
even
time.
though, even though nowadays you and I'm still dealing with it.
Yeah.
I'm going to probably have to write Life Begins at 106 or something when I'm dead.
Yeah.
But no, it's just he had this really good way of, because we had discussions like once in a while, we talk about death. And he looked at me, I remember one time we were driving, he said, when you go to bed at night, are you afraid? And I go, why would I be afraid? He goes, what? You have no guarantee you're going to wake up.
Yeah, but
Why
you
aren't
won't
you?
know.
Yeah. He goes, why would you fear that? And I'm just going, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to wake up. And he goes, that's exactly how you should think about death. Be very certain it's not what they say it is.
Yeah.
Your spirit is still going to be there.
Wake up. Yeah.
No need to fear death at all. He goes, in some ways, welcome it. Take the fear out of it. Take all this bad stuff that everybody says, because he was saying this back in the 80s, where he's saying all this healthcare stuff.
Yeah.
It's all about fear of death. Where everybody's honest for everything. From, it's like now I've developed a whole theory that there's 3 things you shouldn't talk to people about. That's politics, religion, and food.
For sure.
Because you can get into real arguments with people about food. And and I look at it this way. Because I lived in Indonesia for a little while, and I saw real poverty. Not, you think you see it here, but no. Go to Jakarta and you'll see.
I lived in the Philippines for a while.
And you saw it.
Same thing.
It's brutal.
Oh, you see the kids in the street. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's awful. But the thing about that is, I remember we were in a market, and at that time I was married to a girl. She was Chinese from Indonesia. That's why we were there. And I saw this table with these beautiful yams, and they were like you've been Philippines. It's so cheap. I think this great big bag I got for like 25 cents.
Right.
And so I get this big bag filled up, and I'm all proud because I'm going, let's go back to your parents and cook these up. And she made me put them back. She said, oh no, those are for poor people. Only poor people eat that food. Don't put, my family will be so embarrassed.
Oh, I love you.
And I'm going, in the United States, this is considered health food. We in America, we have enough money and enough resources and opportunities available to be really arrogant about what we eat. Most cultures don't have that. They're eating to survive. And I put it to this one girl one time. She was really arrogant about food. And I said, if I put you in the streets of Jakarta for a week, you'd be in the trash can behind McDonald's getting whatever you can get.
Yeah.
And she took offense to that. I go, no, but that's the truth. Don't ever think it's not. Because if you are put in the position of all this, whole foods and everything taken away from you, you'll eat anything to stay alive. So there's this arrogance about food that we need to kind of get over. And it's also, we all have different propensities, and I knew an Australian Zen teacher. He said that every day for his Western students, he'd bring them half of a chocolate bar. And I go, why do you do that? And he goes, because they grew up on sugar. And if they don't get some, they can't sit.
Wow.
He goes, it's just like the Chinese. If you don't give them starches, they can't sit. So they got to have white rice. So it's, we got to look at things a little bit different because we're very arrogant about our food. And truthfully, the evidence is not there about saying if I eat a certain way, I'm going to live longer. There's no evidence.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like my joke about that is somebody will tell me, well, be careful about eating foods because they have lots of sugar in it. And I go, could you please direct me to see your unhealthy fruitarians? Because I've never seen one.
Right.
Are they overweight? Are they, no, fruit is not bad for you. Yes, there's sugar in it, but sugar is also something we need.
Right.
And macrobiotics tried to teach us that if we can learn to eat indigenous food from where we grew up, what we grew up with, we'll be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm from Minnesota, so things like potatoes and corn, etc. Those are the foods that actually make me feel good. It's not daikon and seaweed.
Right.
My body didn't grow up with that.
Yeah. And someone could say to you, that's all starches. You're going to gain weight. It's going to turn to fat. And yet not everybody in Minnesota is obese from eating corn and potatoes.
Well, and it's also the question, you got to also judge it by the fact that Minnesota is a very cold place.
Right.
Go to Alaska and see what the one item everybody's buying. They're buying blubber.
Blubber, yeah.
Because they need the calories from it to keep their bodies warm.
Yeah.
Likewise, in northern climates, you need certain carbohydrates. Or if you try to live off greens and carrots, etc., you're going to be freezing to death. Your body can't handle it. So we don't really put a lot of, granted, I'm not in agreement with fast food at all. I wish they would, just bulldoze them all down because they're only interested in profit. They're not interested in my health.
Right.
I mean, I agree in trying to eat healthy, but I also don't want to be so arrogant, as to think that I have to get in arguments over, again, there was a Zen master called Taijiquan that T.T. and I were friends with. And I remember we were sitting one time and we had this discussion. I said to him, he was an older Japanese monk. And I said, are you vegetarian? I'm kind of actually playing with him a little bit. And he goes, oh, yes, very vegetarian, whole life vegetarian. And then he stops and then he does that Japanese,
yeah.
Except.
I
go, what do you mean except? If I go to my mother's house and she makes me fried chicken, I have to eat the fried chicken. She's my mother. How can I tell my mother, your food isn't good? It's not good enough for me. He goes, that's bad karma. Tell my mother that. So he says, I eat the fried chicken. And then he smiled and he goes, actually, fried chicken, very good. So he's following something that the writer John Blofeld said that I always appreciated. It's better to follow the spirit of a vow or precept than it is to follow it fanatically.
I was listening to a talk by Ram Dass the other day on YouTube, and he was saying, I'm a vegetarian, but I will eat whatever somebody puts in front of me.
I liked what Taijiquan said.
Yeah.
I have no right to tell this person, your food's not good enough for me.
Yeah.
That in itself is not a good way of dealing with life.
Yeah.
And it's even, I look at it this way too. I mean, I've studied and been around enough to, like in Buddhism, the Theravadis, who are actually the ones that wrote the history of Buddha because they were there. Mahayanas were 300 years in the future. But they said that, Buddha died from eating bad pork. Now, I have to make that decision in my head. I know that Buddha begged for his food. So did somebody sneak it into his bowl and he didn't know about it? Or did he purposely know it and ate it? I don't know that.
Right.
But I would think if he was Buddha, he would know there was pork in the bowl. I don't know.
Right. And it was rotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in those days too. I mean,
Right.
nowadays you and I we can go buy a pork chop and it can still be pink and we can eat it.
Yeah.
And we
But
won't.
even 20
They,
years ago, we couldn't
yeah,
because the
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 way they
practices of
process.
raising the pigs was different. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything is, but I look at that and I'm going, okay, so, you know, I was, my upbringing, vegetarian is, the spiritual thing to do until I think about it. I mean, people don't realize that Hitler was a better vegetarian than most monks. He was adamant.
And look what he did.
Yeah. And look, so it doesn't make you more spiritual.
No.
Neither does being celibate.
Right.
Celibacy was designed to keep monastic communities functioning. You can't have men and women enjoining with each other all day long and expect that they're not going to rip each other's clothes off or something. They were divided for a purpose.
Right.
But celibacy in and of itself, I know a celibate for 8 years. It's still a sexual lifestyle. You're still dealing with sex constantly.
Yeah.
And as Buddha said, if there was one energy stronger, nobody could get enlightened. He was very clear about that. And the stories that the Theravadas tell, different than the Mahayana, they talk about Buddha lecturing on the Dharma, and his wife is asleep with her head in his lap.
Mm.
They tell all sorts of stories about how he was still with her.
Yeah.
But the Mahayanas tried to wipe it all out. Now, I'm not trying to say bad about either side of it. I mean, I understand them, but I think that as cultivators, we have to understand that what's most important is what works for you. So hopefully we get more of that, because we've become, let's keep this in mind too. We basically borrowed a whole bunch of stuff for Asia and plotted it in our country. But we have such a short history with it. We don't really understand it culturally as such, and its history, etc. We get kind of fanatical with it in some ways, whereas you don't find Asians being quite the way we are with it, because we're new at it
to us, right?
And we're thirsty, so
Yeah.
I mean, I've met Chinese they say they're Buddhist, but man, they know nothing. Just nothing about it. I met these people that I can't remember the name of the school, but they it's a Japanese school, and all they do is recite from the thing from the Lotus Sutra. Can't remember the name of the school. Tina Turner was part of them. She was really involved with them. Nothing wrong with the school at all. But I remember my ex-wife was friends, and she went to that place for Tina Turner, where they all chant, and she was really impressed and really liked it. And yeah, chanting's wonderful, But what was interesting, her friends would come over, and I'd say, "So do you guys actually go through the Lotus Sutra?" And they're going, "What's Lotus Sutra?"
Huh. Yeah.
And I go, "That's where your school comes from." No, really? I do not know this. Yeah, I mean, it's like they had no concept whatsoever of some of the historical things and where their stuff comes from. Not that I think that's bad. I'm not even saying that they're wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it kind of goes to show what this white guy who, I started chewing on everything I could get my hands on because I didn't understand.
Yeah.
But I wanted to. It's kind of like the people ask me about well, why did you get into this? And I go, because my girlfriend, when I was 16 years old, bought me the big gray, I Ching book.
Ah, see, it's her fault.
Yeah, and I look at it and I go, but they go, oh, did you have an interest in I Ching? I don't even know why she bought it for me. What I do know is when I opened it up and I read things like "Let your magic tortoise fly," those were really cool verses, and I
Yeah.
liked them. And that's where my interest developed, and it kept up because I really like what these teachings say. And fortunately I've stayed with it long enough that at least I feel in part I'm seeing more truthfully what some of it's about. Uh, and because anytime you mix religion in with something, something's going to go wrong. Sorry, that's the
For
nature of
sure, for
religion.
sure. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, um, I started being pulled toward the teachings of Shu Yun and Hsuan Hua, who, you know,
Yeah.
that's your lineage in Buddhism. And, you know, um, I've got both their pictures up on my altar here with the Heart Sutra between them. And Heart Sutra is one of the Heart
Hmm.
Sutra and Lotus Sutra that you've studied. Um, and I always, had wished I was able to, or had the chance to go to the city of 10,000 Buddhas and meet Master Hua. But you took refuge there. You became a disciple
Yeah.
there, and you had another student of Shu Yun was your teacher as well. So you had like two lines from the same master
Hmm.
from there. What led you to that? Was it proximity to where you were living, or what brought you toward kind of that Chan Buddhism and that particular line, or is just happenstance?
Yeah. My story's not all that interesting. I do have to tell you what it was.
Yes, please.
I was living in Minneapolis, and I was really good friends, and I was living with a girl who worked for it was called Gnostica magazine.
Hmm.
And they were all into the Wicca, and I wrote some articles on Chinese stuff, and I became the owner, him and I became very good friends, etc. And one evening, but so I'm involved, they had a bookstore, and that's where I first, got my like Daoist yoga book from when it first came out and all that.
Was
Uh,
that Charles Luke's book, Daoist
yeah,
Yoga? Yeah,
it's a great
Luke
book.
Kuan Yu. Yeah, good book.
So anyway, I one evening we were living in St. Paul. I went over, there was a really cool bookstore that had lots of spiritual Asian stuff, used books. You can get them really cheap. So I went there, and I went in the back, and there was a book called, I just saw it. It was a little green book, and it said Sutra in 42 sections.
Wow.
So I take it. It's just a little book, and they want $3 for it. But what happened was I opened it up. Right there was a big, a full page picture of Hsuan Hua sitting in meditation.
Mm.
To this day, I don't know exactly what happened, but I looked at that picture and I went, he's real. I've got to meet this man.
Yeah.
So I bought the book. I went home. I stayed up all night and read Sutra in 42 sections,
Wow.
which is basically explaining the levels of arhats. And I thought, if I go meet this man, I should be able to get the first one, stream entry.
Right.
That might be open to me. And the girl I was living with at that time, I just said, I know this is going to be odd, but tomorrow I'm leaving. She
Wow.
goes, where are you going? I'm going to the city of 10,000 Buddhists. I don't care. And I remember these thoughts. I don't care if I have to live in the closet with the cleaning buckets.
Right.
I have to go meet this man.
You felt drawn and compelled.
Yeah, really drawn. Next day, I was on a bus to California,
Wow.
and that's how I ended up
Now, were you a
meeting Sean.
teenager or
No,
20?
I was. This is the interesting part. I was exactly 29 years old.
Huh.
And I arrived the very next day. This is in November, I forget the exact date. But the very next day, Jim Jones kills everybody down in Guyana. My family's freaking out
Right.
because Stuart got on a bus and went to this weird spiritual community and he's going to drink Kool-Aid.
Right.
And I had to assure them that, first of all, I couldn't find the Kool-Aid. They don't have
You
it.
were looking for it. You couldn't
Yeah.
find it.
And, but yeah, that settled down. But it was really fascinating to me because to this day, everybody, for the most part, not everybody, but most of the people that I interacted with at City of 10,000 Buddhas, and I cannot explain this, but I knew who they were.
Wow.
I just couldn't say their name. I became very good friends with a number of guys there. And that whole time, I know you, but I can't remember your name kind of idea. And he goes, well, my name's Peter. I go, no, that's not your name. There's something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to be all
You think
anything
that's
about
like
it.
a past life thing where?
Yeah, it had to
Yeah.
be.
Right.
Because then Hsuan Hua, once in a lecture that we sat through, and he said right at the end of it, he said, which really hit home with me, he said, I've never told all of you this before, but we tried doing this back in the Tang Dynasty, but we didn't completely finish. So now we're back here. Now we got to get it done. You all have a job to do. And that really hit home because there were just too many weird things.
Yeah.
I can't even explain some of them. I don't know where they came from, but so my thing was, I just considered myself really lucky. I mean, and now, it's for me, it's like I'm in communication with a couple of people that they're still involved, and one guy still lives there. And, it's kind of it because now on YouTube, there's all sorts of things with Hsuan Hua.
Yeah, I've been watching them over the
Yeah,
years.
and I don't even recognize the place because when I was there, they just bought it. And we were redoing buildings, and the statue, the 1,000-hand, 1,000-arm, that showed up, but that was all rosewood. It hadn't been gilded yet. And the images, literally, I'm Alan Nicholson, the guy that did this out there. He's the woodworker. They have 10,000 gold images, ceilings, walls, everywhere in this hall. None of that was there. We just had bare painted, peeling walls. And so I look at it now, I don't recognize most of it. But it makes me, and I don't recognize the people.
And you don't feel compelled to go back, right? Since that time, because it's like.
No, I don't. I went back once. And this is when I was still married to this Chinese girl. And we went back, and it was interesting. The guys that I knew really well, we were all happy to see each other, blah, blah, blah. And then I wanted to go show her the hall, the big hall. And we walked into it. And as we're there, this Chinese nun out of Taiwan, I had never met her before. And all she was trying to do was sell us videotapes and cassette tapes. And I'm trying to explain to her, I helped build this, and we're just here to reminisce and look at it. And she goes, oh, but in the back, we got many things it's like she didn't even hear me.
Yeah.
And, we hung out for most of the day, but it was different. And I just kind of like, I don't know that I could be here anymore. It's too different for me now. When I was there, it was mostly American guys. And then it just became, now it's just predominantly Asian women. They kind of run the place. And not that that's bad, it's just different. And I just didn't feel Actually, I think I've been there 3 times since I left. And each time I just kind of, this, I love what they do and what they stand for. And this place is phenomenal. But when I was living there, one of the things I discovered about me was I'm such a putz that I needed a teacher to look over me. City of 10,000 Buddhas, keep in mind, is clerical, monks and nuns. So you're following a program when you think of teaching. Whereas in like City of 10,000 Buddhas, Buddhist monastery, huge place, there isn't one meditation class, not one.
Really?
Yeah, they don't teach you. You learn by following what monks do. You get up at 3:30 in the morning, you sit the 2 hours, you just follow until you get it. Whereas I wanted somebody that was on me every day. And that's what I got with TT.
Yeah.
And I needed that. I needed somebody, to call me on my stupidity and to make me work for it, basically. Whereas I didn't feel that at City of 10,000 Buddhas. I felt I learned a lot, grateful I could sit through all those lectures and be around people and all that. But I never felt, even though I'm a disciple of Hsuan Hua, it wasn't that kind of teaching. It wasn't Stuart, come here.
Right.
It was not that scenario. You were just part of the whole group learning, and that's fine, it has its uses. But for me, I needed something more individual.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel that I had enough background. I mean, keep in mind, I probably sat, maybe 20 minutes a week before I went there. And then when I get there, when I finally move up to the City of 10,000 Buddhas a few weeks later, I'm thrust into a Chan session that is 22 hours a day. You get to sleep 2 hours, you get to eat once, but the rest is all meditation. Now, after the first week, you could have put me in an institution. And if I had driven out there, I probably would have left.
Yeah.
It was that intense. But after the second week, it got a little better. Third week was really nice. But it's such hard work.
Yeah.
And lots of great experiences. I got it. It's part of my makeup. But I needed a teacher.
And you
And
met your first Taoist teacher there. Is that correct?
Well, he was a professor, teacher kind of idea.
Got it.
A Professor Wu Yi. Yeah, he was really a cool guy. And he taught me a lot about the Tao Te Ching and he kind of introduced me into the ideas of, Taoist alchemy, so to speak. But there are a number of other people that would show up.
Right.
That also had, they were learning, and, you got such a variety of people. Even God, I'm trying to remember his name, the guy out of San Francisco, the teacher with the bald head, and he's always, can't remember his name right now, but his students showed up. We had a number of his students because this guy is saying that, Chan Buddhism is the highest. He was a Tai Chi teacher, all of his students, so they all kind of intermingled up there. But I met all sorts of people. I mean, one of my favorites was, I'm sure you've heard of, touch therapy. And the woman that started it, Dr. Dolores Krieger, she was one of the most incredible people I ever met.
Wow.
She drove me to the airport in San Francisco, and we, 2.5 hours we got to talk. And she told me her story about how this all developed. And Hsuan Hua was convinced she was a sage. And she had a whole approach to this that you don't find in the New Age world.
Right.
And we got to meet, from the Hopi Indians, Oshana, the granddaughter of Grandfather David, shows up and she teaches for a week. We got another guy that really helped me a lot was Professor Lin. He was he's the guy that did a lot of things with feng shui out of San Francisco, Berkeley area. And he was incredible, you know. So it was like there was so much there for me, but yet I wanted a teacher. I wanted that scenario. I wanted my master Po.
Right. You want a mentor under a master. I understand it.
Yeah. You know, so but I was, like I said, I'm just this stupid little kid out of Minnesota. You know, through TT, I got to meet so many incredible people. My connections with City of 10,000 Buddhas has led me into meeting all sorts of incredible people.
Yeah.
And I learned from all of them, I guess. And I just hope that I put it, you know, my hope is that I put it all to good use. I'm trying to, but, you know.
You've done great work translating tons of texts.
Well,
I mean, the one I'm reading right now is Jade Emperor's classic, Mindset classic.
That's the first Daoist book I did.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I just found out that it's been, there's a guy that's going to help me translate, I guess, some texts. He's an American, but he translates for the Taoist Association in China. He's there now. And he told me, he said, you don't know how many times I've come across your book here at White Cloud and other Taoist monasteries. He goes, they use it.
That's crazy.
And it is crazy. I go, it's in English. What do they know?
Right.
And he goes, yeah, but they, you know, when foreign students show up, and there were a few teachers.
Quite a compliment.
It's a huge compliment to me.
Yeah.
Simply because, you know, being around to have them, and, you know, I mean, I found out certain things, you know, like some of my, like, Imagination Becomes Reality was, that was put into most of the foreign hotels in China during that whole thing with Healing Mind with Bill Moyers. They used his book and my book and sold it as a package.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah, and which I never thought Imagination Becomes Reality was that great of a book, but it served a purpose. It was showing Tai Chi, it was in English, and they could the hotels could market it, I guess. Yeah. But it is a big compliment. But I know for my own purposes, that has more to do with TT than me. Not gonna, because I remember with when I married she was the Chinese from Indonesia. When we first flew there to go and I wanted to meet her parents, we landed at the Semarang airport. You know, now keep in mind, those are all where you actually walk across the runway. You know about it.
Yeah.
And so when we land, we see, I mean, there's like maybe 80 to 100 people. And there's a number of signs saying, welcome, Stuart. And I looked at Liang and I'm just going, are these your relatives? She goes, I don't know those people. She goes, my relatives are over there. See those 6 people?
Those 6.
She goes, the rest, I don't know who they are. And I'm going, what's going on? Why are they? And when we get off the airplane, making a long story short here, I find out that, you know, my ex-wife had told her boss, who was a former, they run a big travel agency. They all knew about T.T. Liang, and they knew about me because I wrote Imagination Becomes Reality. And they all want to learn Tai Chi from me.
Wow.
Yeah, which proves the world's really round. And really good. And so anyway, but here's the kicker. So I get off the airplane and people are greeting me, but they're also handing me Xerox copies of my book, wanting me to sign it for them. Now, at first I'm kind of going, You bastard.
Right.
But then I realized my book cost $20.
Right.
That would be most of their salary for a month.
Yeah.
So they had to, their way of getting a book was to Xerox it. That was the cheapest way they could do it. I let it go. I never said a word about it, but I just thought that was interesting because that was I ended up, when I was in Indonesia, I ended up, and I know you know about this, but there's like cigarettes, which are all over Asia. There's a guy by the name of Wei Song, Bat Bang Hartno, that he owned Jarum cigarettes, which he was richer than most people could ever. He even said, I could spend $1 million a day and live 10 lifetimes and still have money.
Jeez.
Yeah, I taught him, and we got hung out a little bit together, which is kind of funny because he kept calling me, wanting me to introduce him to another teacher, and I didn't know who he was, so I kind of disregarded him. But anyway, it was really fascinating because of the fact that this was T.T. I didn't realize how far and wide T.T.'s reputation went. And I really didn't know how much I was connected to him. I wrote, I did imagination, my name's on the book, but I never put that into context as being anything, being about me necessarily, being skilled or anything like that. But it definitely played, it was completely different experience. And I should have stayed there, but because they treat teachers differently in Asia than they do here. So I learned I had to be really careful in classes. I remember one guy came in, one of the students, he had this really beautiful batik shirt on. And I commented about, that is really a beautiful shirt. I didn't know too much about batik, but enough to know that was really well done. So that evening when we get back to the hotel, there's 10 shirts sitting on the counter for me. Somebody once said to me, what do you miss most? And I joked, what do you miss most about America? Because we had been there for 3 months. At that point, we stayed for 6, but 3 months. And I said, pizza. I was joking.
Yeah.
5 pizzas were on the counter at the hotel when I got back. So I learned to keep my mouth shut because they take it I am their teacher. Therefore, if I say something, they have to try to please me with it. So I stopped saying things completely, but it was really a unique experience because I had more students in Indonesia than I had in the United States. There was like between 3 different groups, it was probably 120 people. So I was busy when I was there. But, and I got to meet, I actually, for just a couple days, it wasn't very long, but I taught the bodyguard of Suharto's son. He wanted to learn some stuff. And, and that rich guy, that was amazing because, he lived in palaces. It was so fun to go teach him because it was like unbelievable. They were a little disturbing because when you walk up to him at first, it's all guys with machine guns.
Right.
He has an army around him all the time. And I kind of go, well, I'm not knocking you down.
Even by accident.
Yeah, you're really skilled. You're better than me.
Right.
But no, it was a nice experience. And it really taught me about my teacher and how, and I've had that same thing. Even in Indonesia, I went to a Theravada Buddhist. They had a little retreat place there with all these little tiny meditation houses.
Oh, nice.
And I went there and I talked to the teacher, and he goes, where did you learn your Buddhism? And I go, well, I lived at City of 10,000 Buddhists. He goes, Hsuan Hua. And he immediately jumps in. And I go, yeah, Hsuan Hua. You met Hsuan Hua? I go, yeah, he was there when I was there. Yeah, he
Right.
didn't like pay special attention to me, but
Right.
I
We were in the
saw him.
same room.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw him every day. I said hi.
Right.
Uh, no, it's yeah, but Chunwa, even in China, me and a couple guys went there, and we went to uh, in Shanghai, the reclining Buddha temple,
Mm.
and beautiful place, you know. But when we were done seeing the reclining Buddha up there, we went downstairs, and I noticed that there was a hall, and I went around the corner, and they had this beautiful image of Guan Yin.
Mm.
And then there was like 4 or 5 Chinese ladies sitting over in the corner drinking their tea and gossiping. And over on the other end was this old Chinese monk just sitting in a chair. He was obviously put in charge to watch things, I guess. But I thought this was a great opportunity. Here I'm in the temple where Shi Yun taught, right? So I'm not leaving here until I recite the Da Bei Jiu. So I go over and I light the incense and I kneel down and I do the Da Bei Jiu, 3 times. When I'm done, first of all, the old ladies were like, huh? Like,
Right.
round eye, what are you doing? They were just kerfuffled by this whole thing. But as I started walking out with my friends, the old Chinese monk, he goes, oh, 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 he calls me over. Now, my Chinese I read Chinese much better than I speak it
Yeah.
because I don't get to speak. But anyway, so he calls me over and he looks at me with his finger and he goes, Shudi, Xuanhua,
Ah, nice.
disciple of Xuanhua. And I
Mm-hmm.
went, I understood. I went, yes. And so anyway, then he gets this other monk who knows English pretty well, this younger one. And when we have a conversation, and I go, how did you know I'm a disciple of Xuanhua? And he goes, because you do old way. He said, Xuanhua, because he was here. He was certified by Shiryu and all that stuff.
Mm.
And he goes, you had a way of how you bow, how you light incense. All those are, he goes, every school has their own way. And he said, you did it the old way from here. He goes, so I knew you're American. I knew Xuanhua in America. You had to be Xuanhua disciple. And I went, you're clever.
Nice.
Because I don't know that I would have caught that, but
Right.
he saw it all. He just
Wow.
the way, and even the way I recited it was, different than, because he said a lot of the way he was putting it, the way that a lot of people recite it, comes out of the whole idea of what they call this kind of southern from Nanjing kind of
Mm.
accent with it. It's very high pitched and it's Namo la da da do. And they go very fast. And he goes, you were Namo la da no do la ye ye. And he said that's how we always did it
Yeah.
here. And so Xuanhua's influence, again, it's not, and I'm trying to make this clear, it's not me. These guys, their reputations and what they did was so phenomenal that even if you're slightly connected to them, people want to hear about it. And I have been caught in that many times where they tell me what it was like when you were there. And I'm going, boring. Yeah, and on those days off, I rake leaves, I trim bushes,
Right.
I you know, tried to find ways to get into town to go to Taco Bell, all
Mm-hmm.
this kind of, all this kind of stuff. And so unfortunately for me, I didn't really have a context of how important these people were when
Right.
I met them. And that came later. And I mean, I'm now seeing Xuanhua was, even though I saw lots of things and I was amazed by him when I was there, but since then I've learned so much more about everything he did,
Mm-hmm.
that it's mind-boggling. And I feel, even though I'm not giving myself any great credit for that bowing pilgrimage, but if it wasn't for him, I would have never done it.
Yeah.
And I look at, gotten real comfortable with the fact that I did what I could do. I did exactly what Hsuan Hua told us to do. When I first entered and came to San Francisco and went to Gold Mountain, over the door, just as you were ready to leave, he put up a sign and it says, try your best.
Mm.
And that's all any of us ever can do.
Yeah.
I am not, I don't like when people think that they have to go sit in a hut or climb a mountaintop or do all these very extreme things. No, just try your best.
Yeah.
Try your best to be a good person. Or as T.T. once put it to me, which I love this statement, he says, your whole job is to leave in better condition than you arrived. Like I said, I'm very grateful. It's afforded me a life. It's afforded me, I've got great friends. Yeah, there's people out there that don't like me. I know they don't. And some of them told me. But that has to do mostly with, TT's world, which there was a martial arts side to that world. So naturally there's all this junk, I don't pay any attention to it necessarily, but that kind of nonsense, is embedded in that world. But, I just look at it and, and I know, I don't get along with everybody in the Taoist world. I have my disagreements with people about what they do and how they do it. And, I'm just so everybody hears this, because this is my big thing. I'm really I don't like New Age stuff. I'll just say it out loud. I don't really, to me, it's coming across, it's not real.
Well, it hasn't been here for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
It's new, it's untested, and it's pulling from things without understanding maybe the context in which those things were developed and honed over time.
Well, it's just like recently somebody sent me a thing about, and I'm listening to all these, I'm not saying they're bad people, but they're talking about this awakening the consciousness and all this mindfulness stuff. And they're acting, I'm serious, they're acting like they really have accomplished something. And I'm kind of like, no, you're a human being. You should be conscious. But that's not enlightenment. Get over yourselves. They were kind of treating themselves
It's
like,
ego power grabs of,
I teach this awakening. And I'm going, no, you're not teaching anything more than the guy that works at the gas station. We're all, the way I try to put it is, we all think we're special when we're not, truthfully. I can say I meditate, but that doesn't make me special. What I'm trying to do when I meditate is change my reality. I want a better existence. Lo and behold, that's what an alcoholic does and a drug addict does as well. They're doing it to change their reality.
Right.
Now, I think meditation is a better way of going about it, but there's still a common thread between the two. And awakening to one's consciousness, being mindful, is not enlightenment. And it's nowhere near. If you start reading things about like Hsuan Hua, mindfulness was something they had when they were 2. It's not the object of cultivation. You're leaving out all the things about the spiritual penetrations. You're leaving, not one of those people would be able to tell me that they had recognition of past lives or any of, they're just not able to access their, what I would call their Tao mind or their Buddha mind. Yes, all of us can be quiet, tranquil, have a nice experience, and feel like we've connected with our consciousness. Yes, that's a good thing. Most people don't even get that far. But I don't like that they treat it as if that was the end goal.
Yeah.
And these people are not cultivators. They are people that are, as soon as they're done giving the interview, they're off to some, Whole Foods to go eat. Maybe I'm being too cruel, and
Well,
probably because I've been,
you
but
know,
I just don't like it.
I get irritated with the mindfulness movement because the people who are leaders of that movement in this country, at least, spend 50 years in mindfulness and never go beyond
Yeah,
that simple practice. And no
yeah,
matter how many raisins you chew, and now they're doing advertisements for radical mindfulness.
yeah,
What's radical about it?
yeah,
You need to get to a no mind state. You need to transcend those states. You need to have altered states of consciousness. There's so many different levels beyond that to stick in the entry level of meditation as the and promote it as the
yeah.
ultimate level. It
Well,
just shows their limits, but boy, do they know how to market that.
yeah, and I'm just kind of my opinion. I had a discussion with one. They're going, yeah, I think I've reached this state of mindfulness. And my response to that was, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
You're a human, and mindfulness, if you translate it correctly, is you're paying attention.
Right.
Yeah, it's good to pay
You're
attention.
observing and paying
Yeah,
attention.
when you're driving, it's good to be mindful. When you have a knife in your hand, it's good to be mindful. When you're helping somebody that's sick, it's good to be mindful of, but it's called paying attention. So you're saying you've mastered the idea of paying attention. But that's not anywhere near what
It's
they're
not a
talking about.
cultivation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not, because they're missing. I'll kind of, I'm going to have to kind of go, but I want to close with this because this is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are in this world that you and I are in. They're treating themselves as this, literally, they're a physical human being trying to have a spiritual experience. That's why we're cultivating. That's why we do that. We got experience desire up the yazoo. Please let me see bolts coming, thunderbolts out of my fingertips. I want to see Buddha. I want to do. So we're coming from the standpoint of this physical body saying we want these experiences. When the truth of the matter is, and this is the truth, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and our job is to clean it up. We're here in this body because of retribution. Clean it up. That's how our spirit is awakened, not the other way around. The physical body is not going to do that for you. You have to clean it up. That's why you hear all this stuff about tranquility, clarity, you know, uh, like I love Lao Tzu's things about all you have to do is be frugal, kind, and have humility. You'll be a good human being. That's cleaning yourself up.
Yeah.
So you are this spirit. You're here. You got here because of your spirit. As Taoism puts it, there was a primordial spirit. It was there before you were born here. It's here now, and it'll be there after you leave. The job is to clean up your retribution. That's what you're doing by achieving what Taoism simply puts as clarity and tranquility. You want clarity. If you have clarity, you're going to die well. If you have tranquility, you're going to live well. And if you really read Chuang-Tzu and you really read Lao Tzu and even a lot of Buddhist books, they're saying exactly what I just said here. Don't approach it that you are a physical body trying to have a spiritual experience. That's backwards and it's frustrating, and most people never accomplish anything. But if you know, excuse me, clearly that you are a spiritual being. That's how you got here. You're in your mother's womb. You were a little spirit, and once we came out, the work started.
Indeed. Stuart, thank you so much for spending so much time with me today
Oh, it's a
and
pleasure. I love
sharing your
them.
stories with our audience. Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I talk too much.
no, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I didn't have to pull teeth to get you to say something, which is often the case.
Well, yeah, I
Very
know.
nice.
No, I love this stuff. And yeah, but I am kind of uh, breaking a rule in Taoism. Taoism says through talking we dissipate qi.
Yes.
So I have kind of, you have to excuse me, my voice just went. So we
So
will
we'll leave
end
it there. Thank you so much. And
anytime you
we'll
want to
stay
do
in
it.
touch. We will
Okay, we
definitely.
certainly will.
I really
Thank
appreciate it.
it goes both ways here. It's again because we've known each other technically for so many years.
Yeah,
It's a real pleasure to just sit down with you and have the discussion.
I love
So
it.
we can do it again whenever you
You
wish.
got it. I would love it.
And I wish you success with your podcast.
Thank you.